Welcome in to Run the League. This is your host, Grayson Grunhafer, and we are on NFL and 365 Sports. And today, I'm going to talk to you about some of the free agents that I really like at the wide receiver position. Obviously, going into the NFL offseason, I'll maybe talk a little bit about the Super Bowl as well, just kind of my thoughts and takeaways from the final game of the NFL season. So let's get it. All right, everyone, welcome into the episode. Obviously, this is the first episode since the Super Bowl happened. Congratulations, Los Angeles Rams. They are the Super Bowl champs, and it was a heck of a game, honestly, and I was really happy about that. I know a lot of people were worried that it could be a blowout. I thought the Rams would win a little more comfortably, and it ended up being a pretty close game, but a fun one, right? A fun way to end the season, a fun way to end one of the best playoffs I've ever watched, honestly. I mean, every game was really close, really competitive. Got to see new teams get in there and try to win the Super Bowl. Got to see emerging headlines like Joe Burrow, Ja'Marr Chase, Matthew Stafford, Cam Akers. I mean, guys who really thrived this postseason and really improved their stock going forward, whether that's in real NFL or in fantasy football as well. So today, I'm kind of going to look forward a little bit. And we're going to talk about some of the free agent wide receivers who are going to become really big names over the next few weeks, I think. And it's really an interesting time, right? And when you look at the wide receiver position, a lot of people don't value that position as much as some of the other ones, but then you look forward to the Super Bowl and you see guys like, Cooper Kupp winning Super Bowl MVP, Ja'Marr Chase, T. Higgins really emerging and carrying a Bengals team along with, of course, Joe Burrow. You saw the Rams missing Robert Woods and Odell Beckham and how that completely changed the game when Odell got hurt. So I think it's becoming a little more valued, at least this offseason. And to be clear, that this receiver class in the free agency group is phenomenal. So I'm going to go through my top probably 6 free agent wide receivers. I'm going to talk about their stats from the season and also some potential landing spots along with my favorite landing spot for each of them. So the first one is, of course, Davante Adams. So the Packers wide receiver put together one heck of a season, and I don't think he got as much credit this year as he probably deserved. He had career high in targets with 169, career high in receptions with 123, and a career high in yards with 1,553 to go along with 11 touchdowns. I mean, it was a sensational year for him. He was an absolute monster all season long. And of course, the headline with him is, honestly, Aaron Rodgers. What's Rodgers going to do? Where's he going to end up? Is Davante Adams going to be on the same team as Aaron Rodgers? We don't know the answer to that right now. And so because of that, because of how crazy things have been with the Packers, because of the Broncos looking like they're a team that could get Aaron Rodgers, the cap situation in Green Bay, I don't know if they can bring back Rodgers and bring back Adams. I'm going to have Adams going to a new team. And my potential landing spot that I think could work out really well is the Las Vegas Raiders. And the reason for that is obviously the Derek Carr connection. They played at Fresno State together, so they are friends. They've already played together before. Adams is probably looking to get paid this year. I think money is going to be a big thing for him, and the Raiders have the cap room to afford him. I think that if you look at the Raiders' receiving room, you see Henry Ruggs is gone. Bryan Edwards hasn't quite lived up to the hype. So you're seeing there with Renfrow and Darren Waller. And while that's a good tandem, I think they need an alpha. And Davante Adams would bring that to them. I think Josh McDaniels will look to make a splash addition as well in his first year with the Raiders. I just think it makes a ton of sense. So if he can't be with Rodgers, I see the Raiders as really, honestly, a perfect fit for Davante Adams. Now, I do have 3 other potential landing spots. The Denver Broncos, potentially with Aaron Rodgers. I could see that happening. I could see him ending up with the Packers again. My only issue with that is, would he come back if Rodgers wasn't there? And I kind of don't see that happening. But if Rodgers goes back and they can make the money work, maybe he does come back and stay in Green Bay. And then kind of a random one, but the New York Jets. The Jets have a ton of cap room. He could definitely go get paid there. They're a team that looks like they could be building. Really, they have great draft capital, the ability to add some new pieces, a young quarterback. I think the money and just kind of the enticement of maybe going to New York could really appeal to Davante Adams. Moving on to my second top free agent wide receiver, that is Chris Godwin. So Chris Godwin played on the free agent or the franchise tag this year, had a great season, but of course tore his ACL towards the end of the year. He had a career high with 128 targets, career high with 98 receptions, had 1,103 yards and 5 touchdowns in just 14 games this year. So really impressive numbers. Obviously, he's been linked with Tom Brady over the past few years, and before that, his breakout year was with Jameis Winston a few years ago. So he's a fantastic player. I've been on record, as good as Mike Evans is, I think Chris Godwin has been the wide receiver one for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The things that he does for that offense as a blocker, as a slot tight end, as a red zone weapon is just absolutely unique. And while Mike Evans has those big breakout games, and we know how good Mike Evans is in the red zone, Godwin to me has been much more consistent in his role for that team, giving them a safe floor week in and week out, throwing the football. Now, the problem with Tampa Bay right now is Tom Brady is probably gone. He retired. It looks like he's going to be done. Mike Evans really is taking a huge chunk of the salary at the wide receiver position, and the Bucs just don't have a ton of cap room. And so for me, I think this is the time where Godwin does move on, unless, the Bucs can figure something out. I think he's going to move on to a new team. And honestly, the best fit, in my opinion, is the Indianapolis Colts. And the reason I say that is for a number of reasons. But the first one is, when I watch Chris Godwin as a receiver and as a player, the first thing that stands out to me is that blocking ability. And when you watch the Colts play, if they're able to get that flexibility with him as a blocker in an offense that wants to run the football with Jonathan Taylor, I just think it's a match made in heaven. And then you also look at kind of their receiving core in general, their receiving weapons. It's really Michael Pittman and nobody else. So you go out, you get Chris Godwin, and you really allow Michael Pittman to do what he does best, which is the intermediate routes and the deep balls down the field. I just think that right now he has to be used more as a gadget player at times, and it really kind of hinders his game a little bit. And so if you're able to go out and add Chris Godwin, who is just amazing with the intermediate routes, but also is great with the short stuff and being able to get yards after catch, I think you end up with two guys who are amazing at creating yards after the catch and also amazing at just getting open and being able to provide safety blankets for the quarterback position. You throw in Paris Campbell or T.Y. Hilton as field stretchers, and I really do think that Colts offense would take a step in the right direction. Now, a few other guys or landing spots that I like. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers seems like a very realistic one if they're able to figure out the cap room situation. The New England Patriots really need a wide receiver, and they also really love running the football. So again, Chris Godwin could be a great fit there as well. And then the Miami Dolphins, who obviously they have Jalen Waddle. They have a few other receivers, but no one really of the talent level of Chris Godwin. And similar to Michael Pittman, if you put Chris Godwin on the Dolphins, you allow Jalen Waddle to expand his game with his deep ball threat, which is something they did not use at all in Miami, and I think they could really exploit that with him. My third receiver is Mike Williams, the wide receiver for the Los Angeles Chargers. I mean, what a season. He was a wide receiver one this year in fantasy football. He had a career high with 129 targets, career high with 76 receptions, career high with 1,146 yards, and then 9 touchdowns, which was second only to his second year season where he had 10. This is an interesting one for me. I think it should be pretty obvious that he's going to end up on the Chargers with a franchise tag. I just feel like that makes too much sense for both really the team and Mike Williams. $19 million would be what he would command on the franchise tag. If you look at kind of the situation in general for the Chargers, it gives them more time to develop Josh Palmer, who looks like a guy who's up and coming, but I don't know if you can trust him to be your kind of wide receiver 1A, 1B, which is what Mike Williams and Keenan Allen were this past year. I think you keep continuity with Justin Herbert and in that Joe Lombardi offense. I just think there's a need for Mike Williams. And if you watch them play this year, they were at their best when Mike and Keenan Allen were at 100%. I just think if you watched him play, the injury slowed him down in the middle of the season. But at the beginning and at the end of the year, Mike Williams was an absolute problem and absolutely one of the better receivers, more productive receivers in the league during those two stretches. So I do think the Chargers will find a way to get him back. I think it works out for both sides. I think Mike Williams can play for $19 million and then go get a contract when people stop using this perceived notion that, oh, he had a breakout year so late, it was fluky. Now, if he comes back and does it again, he's going to command a very large contract next year, and maybe the Chargers decide to pay him at that point. Some other potential landing spots, the Cleveland Browns make a lot of sense. They need an alpha receiver with Jarvis Landry. They just don't really have a premier weapon at the wide receiver position. The Jaguars, maybe you tried to give Trevor Lawrence another weapon on the outside. And then the Indianapolis Colts, if they don't land Chris Godwin, Mike Williams would be a nice compliment as well as a field stretcher. Moving on to my next wide receiver, Allen Robinson, the wide receiver for the Chicago Bears. And boy, oh boy, Allen Robinson had one of the worst years. It seems so fluky, right? Because in his 8-year career, he'd been so consistent with bad quarterback play, but even he couldn't overcome what Justin Fields put up this year, which was not great. And so Allen Robinson, just looking at the numbers, outside of his injury year in 2017, where he only played one game, it was the lowest targets of his career with 66, lowest receptions of his career with 38, lowest yards with 410, and lowest touchdowns with just 1. It has to be an anomaly, right? Like, there's no way that he is as bad as he was this past season, and now he'll get a chance to prove it, but I don't think it will be with the Bears. I don't see him going back to the Bears, even though, honestly, it shouldn't have been as bad of a fit as it was. So I think he's going to end up somewhere else. And I actually think the Cleveland Browns make a lot of sense. They need a wide receiver one. They need a more reliable weapon than they've had on the outside for the past few years. And I know Odell Beckham was great for the Rams, but he was not great for the Browns. Let's be clear on that. I think Allen Robinson can be better than Odell was for that offense, even with Baker Mayfield at quarterback. I think he would allow Peoples-Jones to develop and allow Jarvis to continue to work in the slot and really continue to feast on those shorter yardage receptions. And I do think the play action ability in that offense is there because their run game is so sound with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. Other potential landing spots, the Eagles, the Dolphins, the Colts, all of those teams could use another outside receiver in their offense. Moving on to the next one, and probably the most polarizing outside of Davante Adams, is Juju Smith-Schuster, the wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was a free agent last year, decided to come back on a small deal with the Steelers, and then after 5 games, he got hurt. He only had 15 receptions for 129 yards. It was just a tough year for him. The injury obviously held him back. The Steelers' offense wasn't great either, so kind of all that included together, it did not work out well for him. Now, there's been reports that he could come back to the Steelers because a lot of teams simply aren't interested in Juju. But I don't see that happening. I think it's time for Juju to move on, go to a new spot, get a fresh start. He needs a fresh start. Based on what we've seen, he needs to go somewhere else and try to become the player that we all thought he could be a few years ago. So I'm going to actually have him going to the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I know that probably is an interesting one with Pittsburgh and Philly being so close together, but I think it makes a lot of sense. He gets to stay in that Pennsylvania area, but he also gets to go to a new team where he can kind of be he won't be the wide receiver one. That's Devonta Smith. But he could go in and be the clear wide receiver number 2. And you have Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert who can take up some targets and take away some pressure from him. And I just think he could be a really, really nice fit there. And they really need someone who can just run short routes, get open, be more of a gadget player than what they have. Because Devonta Smith is a clear one. He can beat you deep. He can beat you in the intermediate routes. But outside of him, It's like you have him, and then you got Dallas Goedert down the middle of the field and in the red zone, but they don't have anything else. Jalen Reagor and Quez Watkins are just deep threats. You need someone who can win in those intermediate and short routes and guys who can take quick passes and create yards after catch. I still believe in Juju. I still believe he can fill that role, and I think it would make him a really nice fit for the Philadelphia Eagles. Other potential landing spots, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, if they want to take a discount. So you take Juju, you let Godwin go, and you get a huge discount there. I could see that happening. The Tennessee Titans would be really interesting as well, especially since the Julio thing didn't work out this past season. And then kind of a wild card, the Kansas City Chiefs. They could really use another intermediate wide receiver, guy that they can get the ball to really quickly and go out and make some plays. That would be a really interesting fit, and I think that would be really nice for Juju if he was able to go to the Chiefs. I mean, he could be an absolute superstar in that offense. Moving on to my final wide receiver, there's a few other free agents as well, but this is my top group that I'm looking at today, and this is Michael Gallup. The ACL injury kind of set him back a little bit this past season, but 62 targets, 35 receptions, 445 yards, 2 touchdowns in just 9 games. So really productive. He's never been given the responsibility to be a wide receiver 1 or even a wide receiver 2 in an offense because of Amari Cooper and because of CeeDee Lamb. But now he can go somewhere else at 25 years old, and I think the Chicago Bears make total sense for Michael Gallup. First of all, he's a young wide receiver. Second of all, he plays on the outside. And third of all, he gives them just this sense of relief for the offense in general. He can beat you deep downfield, but he can also be, I think, a more reliable wide receiver 1 for that offense, even though they also have Darnell Mooney, who is a breakout guy, had an awesome year, is just a really good wide receiver as well. So I think if you look at that, you see Justin Fields kind of growing with these 2 younger wide receivers and really trying to be that player that everyone thought he could be. And I think Michael Gallup opens up a lot of those things because of his ability in the vertical passing game, but also just giving them more consistency at the wide receiver position. A couple other potential landing spots, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the New England Patriots, and even the Indianapolis Colts could be another option for Michael Gallup. So those are my top free agent wide receivers. It's a really loaded group. If your team needs a wide receiver, this is definitely a pretty good year to have that problem. But these are some of those landing spots that I think make the most sense for these guys as free agency is getting ready to open up here very, very soon after the Super Bowl just ended over the past weekend. So for Grayson Grenafer, this has been Run the League on NFL on 365 Sports.